Oh, there's Susan.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, isn't that pretty? I like her pillow.
Yeah. Where do they live?
There's Birdie.
And I'm gonna make her.
Hi, Birdie.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Great.
She's going to try to get Flo hooked in.
Okay, great.
Come on. Let's see. Now, why is it not letting me make you host?
This has just not been a good day, has it?
No, it's not been a good day.
Oh no.
We need an exorcism for the internet.
Well,
Yeah,
I
pretty much.
gave up watching the church service.
Let me see. Are you signed in as me?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's it.
Why.
Okay, we're, she's going to come back out and leave meeting. Now that should do it. Okay.
Okay, now we're good.
Yeah, okay. There we go. Now you're the host.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
I'm going to call Flo and see if we can.
She's going to call Flo and get that fixed, so we'll see.
All righty, sounds
How are
good.
things otherwise?
Great. I'm from a different location. I'm actually in Sugar Land this morning.
Oh, well.
Yeah. At the last minute, we took the kids to a beach, like Surfside Beach, and so we stayed over.
Hey, Flo,
good,
it's Amy.
good.
I'm calling from Gloria.
Well, I saw my oncologist on Thursday, Dr. Henderson. You know her, right?
Sharonda. I know Sharonda.
Yeah, well, I said something about that. She asked me what I was doing to stay, and I said, well, I'm doing a meeting every Sunday with Birdie. And she said, Birdie?
Yeah.
Jones? And I went, how do you know? She said, well, there's not many birdies. So anyway,
Oh, Birdie, you know her.
I took her a book, Birdie. I took her one of the books, the extra one I had, and I left it with her when I went back for my infusion. So anyway, she's got the book to read.
Awesome. I'm going to have to talk to her about it.
Oh, yeah, and she is fabulous. I love her. Oh,
Yes.
she's great. I'm so glad I changed oncologist. Oh, thank you, God.
Yeah, she's wonderful. Like
Oh,
our
she
kids,
is.
our
She is.
kids like get together and like do activities all the time. So.
Oh, well, good. I didn't know how you knew her, but that was so funny when she said, well, what are you doing in this time to stay, positive? And I said, well, that's one of the things, your class.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Well, she was a very
The link that everybody can watch it, and then it'll be in Monday's email.
in the hospital once for 6 weeks. We saw her a lot.
Oh,
I
wow.
liked her very much.
That's great.
Good. She's good. Very good.
Good morning, Miss Susan and Miss Susan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning to everybody.
Okay, I'm here. You want to try to log in?
Oh, we're trying to get Miss Flo up and
Okay.
going this morning.
I'm wondering where she was hiding.
Yeah.
She always just has a ceiling.
I think I have a very
That's all you can see her flow.
Uh-huh.
I went outside to water my flowers because I couldn't listen to church because it was just too chopped up. And it's super windy outside.
Yes. Well, we did church with Tom and
Oh,
me.
okay. Okay. Well, are you're trying to log into the formation class though? Is that what you want to do now? Okay. I tell you what. Are you have access to your email?
Do you want me to put it on mute for a second? Amy,
Right. Because what I'm going to do is send you.
I'll mute her for a second so she can get it hooked up. But I'll put it back on before we get started?
Now, I was saying that Tom and I did church together. I was the lay reader lector and he was the congregation. We didn't sing. I delivered a 2-sentence sermon, but we did the whole thing.
That's great. We always watch the first half of Casey's church through the sermon and then switch over because that's, the time limit. And I'd watch through the sermon and then we switched over. So I didn't get it all, but I got some.
Well, it just was too intermittent.
Yeah. It makes me crazy. So I have to, but I also hadn't read all my book, Bertie. So it gave me a little bit of time to read ahead as fast as I could. Hi, Carrie.
There's Gary.
Hey.
Good morning.
Here's Linda.
Now I'm trying to unmute Miss Gloria, but I can't unmute it from my end. Can you click the?
Can't hear you.
Yeah, because I muted it for a second while Amy was on the phone, but now I can't unmute it.
Gloria, we can't hear you.
There we go.
There. Now.
Yes, click that link in the email.
Uh-oh. You lost
Okay.
me.
Where am I?
You're here.
I'm here. We
I
had
don't
it.
know where you are.
Amy's trying to still connect. She had to send an email from my computer to Flo to try to get her connected. We're trying our best to get her connected. Well, Amy is. I'm not doing anything.
That's okay. You can hang on to her coattails.
She's doing it, not me.
Yes, so-
We're working on it. She's working on it. But anyway.
So
Let's see.
when you went outside, did you see any Saharan dust?
Yes.
Well, no, but I can't tell today, but yesterday I drove
Oh.
to the cemetery in Temple to Hillcrest, and on the highway it was super
Is there a link or something that
uh,
looks clickable about going from the browser?
dusty. I mean, you could really see it driving up 35. Once you got into town, then you couldn't see it as much.
Okay.
And but then when I went to my brother's, and then when I came home, it was super dusty again.
Wow.
It's just real hazy. That's
Yeah.
how I would describe it. And my phone was saying yesterday, not today, but
Okay, hold on.
unhealthy.
Yeah, unhealthy. Not, yeah.
Oh.
But I was outside quite a bit. But it
Well,
Yeah, Mike was outside a lot yesterday.
gonna
And he has,
Google,
he has
um,
bad allergies.
Sorry,
But for
Gloria.
some reason, it just didn't get to him. Thank
it
goodness.
really got to Tom. We sat outside a little while Friday and he just has paid for it.
Oh. Well, Mike mowed.
Tell it was
Mike
better.
mowed for like 4 hours yesterday. So I thought he would be bad last night, but he was good.
Try to show.
She's still working.
Mhm.
we see Suzanne and Art and Susan and Bill.
I know
Oh.
Susan left and came back with Bill.
Oh, well, good. She found it.
Terrible connection.
And you can't click the link
Yes.
back at all.
We just don't have a good connection. So I was trying to reset it.
Talk about bad connection. Did anyone stick with the church service this
Okay.
morning?
No.
I wanted to hear the end of Becky's story.
I just wondered.
Well, and I feel bad because the last time we had a really bad connection to church was when Becky was preaching.
That's exactly
And so
right.
poor Becky, she's going to think she's the doom.
But
But I
remember,
think it was
it'll be
the Sahara
available.
dust.
Maybe
You can watch it on Facebook later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw on Facebook that she'd retired. So I thought maybe she'd say
Right.
something.
From her piloting at Southwest Airlines.
Yeah.
Really?
So I'm wondering. if
Yeah. She actually doesn't actually retire until sometime in July, but I think
go on and join.
Thursday was her final flight, or what they designated as her final flight.
It's a
I think
big
she's,
deal.
I think it was, I think she's nervous about, not flying anymore.
Yeah.
That would be, but the pictures from her last flight that I got to see, all the hoopla they had in Houston at the airport and in Austin at the airport, and all the honoring of her and the big cakes and all the people and the balloons. And
Is it on
I mean, she was,
Facebook?
I'm sorry?
Is it on Facebook?
Is that
No, it was on something that she posted. But I'm going to get her. I don't know whether she's on Facebook, but I'm going to
Yeah,
get her
'cause
to.
I think so.
Okay. Well, maybe she can send me the pictures and I can post them. But anyway, they're really cool.
How wonderful.
Yeah.
Hopefully Miss Flo will be able to join us. We can go ahead and get started. As you can see, I'm not at my home. I'm in Sugar Land, Texas. We actually went to the beach this weekend, and so we're staying over. I have my connections connected to my cell phone, so hopefully I will stay connected through the
We
morning.
need you, Birdie.
Yeah, we're gonna try it out and see. So let me pull up the slides. Yeah.
All right.
Let's see. Yeah, we got everything working so far.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
And so whenever he's going to be at your house, we'll set up a
Okay,
Zoom
so does anyone want to read the opening prayer for us?
and you can log into that fake Zoom meeting.
I'll read it.
Okay.
Let us pray. Oh, Heavenly Father, who has filled the world with beauty, open our eyes to behold thy gracious hand in all thy works, that rejoicing in thy whole creation, we may learn to serve thee with gladness, for the sake of him through whom all things were made, thy Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so this week, we have our little just for fun. This is a question I posted before, but we didn't have very many responses, so I thought I'd try it again. Have you been pleasantly surprised by anything lately? Does anyone have
On
any?
my birthday, I was told to be available by my husband at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I had no idea what was going on, but
And I don't know.
very close friends of mine did a drive-by little parade with horns. Had I known, I would have dressed a little differently, but anyway, I was dressed, and it was a very pleasant surprise. And that was in April. That was the first month we were fully shut down, and we had no toilet paper, and I actually got toilet paper for a birthday gift. That's the first. And I was pleasantly surprised by that too.
Awesome. Anybody else?
Well, I had a lovely surprise from my bonus daughters.
Home office now.
Tom's two daughters who live in Houston sent flowers and a full everything for a lovely steak dinner, which Tom cooked for Mother's Day. And it just appeared on my front porch. Tom knew it was coming, I didn't. And then they did the same thing for him, which was fun.
Neat.
Nice. That is a good surprise.
It was.
Sounds good. Anybody else?
We went to a new meat market over across from Belton High School, and
Oh,
had two of the best steaks I think I've ever eaten.
Where was it? Or
It's
what is it?
called Cheesy's Meat Market. Isn't that a horrible name? But it was wonderful.
And where was it, Susan?
It's across from Belton High School. It's called Cheesy's Meat Market.
Okay.
And we got a couple of ribeyes and some of their sausage. And he seasoned the ribeyes and Bill cooked them, and they were just so tender. It was
Great.
fantastic. Best steak I've ever had.
It's over by Luigi's.
Yeah, right next to
Yeah.
Luigi's.
Okay. Gotcha.
Easy.
It was wonderful.
That does sound good. Anyone else wants to go?
What about you?
I think I was pleasantly surprised by this weekend. it was kind of a last minute thing that we put together with some friends. And one thing that I did that got me out of my comfort zone was I took my shoes off and walked in the like wet sand. And I was pleasantly surprised that I was like, hey, this wasn't so bad after all. I think I just had the thought of like, I didn't want any like animals or anything to get on my feet. I was pleasantly
Birdie,
surprised.
You had
Birdie.
an experience right out of our book.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a pleasant surprise. It's safe to get in the water. Like my friend's daughter's like 7 or 8 years old. I think she's like 7 years old. And she's like, it's just water. You're right.
Birdie, we're going to get you out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. So that did it for me for sure. So this week we're going over chapters 9 and 10. Chapter 9, carrying water, and chapter 10, feeling pain. Okay, so we'll start with the chapter 9 discussion question was, think of a time in your life when you surprised yourself by dealing capably with an unexpected situation. What was the result of this experience, both at the time and in retrospect? Okay, so does anyone want to start? I'm going to see if maybe we can do the, if I can get it to where everybody can see everybody instead of just my slides all the time. We're going to try something different. Anybody have any thoughts on the question, or do you need to see the question more?
I have a thought that years ago when Hurricane Katrina came, our son and daughter-in-law, no granddaughter then, were living in Houston. And of course, they were all told to evacuate. Our son didn't at first, but our daughter-in-law brought her mother and their one little dog at the time she went and got her from Beaumont, her mom, and they drove for I don't know how long to get to Temple. And Josh eventually came, but he came when it was much easier in the middle of the night after he had gotten some stuff taken care of at their house. But we housed them during that time for about 10 days. And Josh and Amy ended up going back and forth to Houston to check on things after the hurricane actually came through. But our in-law, our outlaw, Eleanor, Amy's mom, stayed with us, and Sadie stayed with us, and we all handled it, I thought, very well. We don't have that big a house. Everybody did have their own bedroom, so that was helpful. But anyway, it was a time I hadn't expected that, but we were glad we were able to offer them shelter for a few days.
Absolutely. I know I grew up in Houston, and so luckily I've never had to live through a hurricane, but tropical storms, it's just anything can happen during those times. And so definitely it helps to lean on family, to kind of get you through those difficult times. That kind of reminded me in the book about when the power went out.
Yes.
And that ordeal that they had to go through, 3 days without power. It's like, wow, I can't say that I can recall a time like that. Has anyone else had to experience that, like multiple days without power?
Yeah.
Yes.
After Hurricane
don't
Rita, we
know.
didn't have power for 10 days.
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
Our power makes us get water also, like Bruce was. So when we don't have power, we don't have anything.
I was amazed in their situation that they couldn't even get water during there.
Well, and then it went below freezing every night. That's what got me.
Yeah. Woo-wee.
Yeah. So does anyone else have any response to the question or situation similar to that?
Something comes to me, it's an incident or a story. I may have told it to this group before, but when I was starting graduate school at Rice, my father drove me down from Dallas to Houston. with whatever I was going to start with. And we had anticipated that we could find an apartment someplace for me to live in, but we had not anticipated the rents that they were going to be asking for. And we could not find a place that had an opening and was affordable to me at all. And it was getting kind of late in the day. And my dad did a most amazing thing, which I had a hard time with. He said, you take that side of the street and I'll take this side of the street. I notice a lot of these houses have garage apartments. Let's just go ring on the doorbells and ask people if they have a garage apartment for rent for a graduate student. And I was totally humiliated. I couldn't imagine, going asking strangers this question. But we went down the street, and sure enough, I rang one couple's doorbell. They were an elderly couple, and he had business that took them both out of town for extended periods of time. And they would be delighted to have me stay in their son's old room, who's grown up, and look after their house for them while they were gone, and they were going to leave in a few weeks. So I moved right in to the boys' room, and it worked out great. I was very, very amazed that worked out.
That is being very capable.
Yeah.
To find a solution to your problem. Very capable.
And a little courageous in the way that you all went about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of reminded me, like, your father was a priest, correct?
Correct.
And so, like, he just it reminds me that it seems like he had this faith, like God would provide, just like start doing the little things that you can, and look in unexpected places and just wait for God to kind of show up and, I guess, put the pieces together. That's kind of.
There's also is that you just can't sit on the corner and wait for God to provide. You have to.
Gene always says, if you can't solve the problem, change the problem.
Oh,
right.
Great.
I got to write that one down. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Anybody else have any thoughts or anything to add?
Well, when my husband was very ill, he wasn't able to do anything around the house or fix anything. Not that I could fix stuff, but there was one particular time, and this was really just about 2 months before he died. My car batteries died. And normally we had 3 cars. It was weird. But Sarah and Aaron had taken 2 down to Austin already. Anyway, I was left with a car with no battery. And it was the day we were to leave, before we were supposed to leave. And I was just sort of at the end of my rope, and I called a couple of neighbors who were not home. And so out of desperation, because he lived completely across town, I called John Hancock. And he said, I'll be right there, as he always says. And I got in the garage and put my car in neutral and pushed it out of the garage, and then ran around and put the brake, because there wouldn't have been any way to get in, for John to get in and, jump it. So I was amazed that I could do that. And my sweet friend John for saving my life when I was at a very low point.
That's wonderful how we can have community with people, and just being there, I guess, in unexpected times, it kind of really makes you feel cared for and loved, That's what that reminded me of. Anybody else have anything? Okay, let's see. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint. There are some other points that I kind of saw about physical labor. There is a substitute for earthiness. From dust we came, and to dust we shall return. That was a part that the author put in the book, but really it came to the point of God made Adam, when she talks about her study of Hebrew and how about the creation story, God made Adam an earthling from the Adama, and please forgive me for these pronunciations. Someone jump in if you know the correct pronunciation.
I think that's right.
Okay, from the earth. And so God made a mud baby, a dirt person, a dust creature. So that was a new insight I hadn't seen before. And God put the earthling on that patch of earth to till it and keep it. And so then she goes on to discuss how labor kind of at some point gets mixed up with punishment. So did anybody have any insights on that passage in the book? So that brought me to the question when she talks about the connection with a person to the earth, and she talks about the work of the digging potatoes. What is your experience with keeping the earth? Does it remind you of your origins, like she discussed with the creation story, or your ultimate end? That you are dust, and to dust you shall return. I know some people in the group this morning are experienced gardeners. Unfortunately, I am not, but does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Experiencing what?
Gardening.
Gardening.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pop in with when she talked about potatoes. I remember my grandmother who lived in a farming community. My grandparents, she had potatoes. Their garage was a dirt floor. And it was, I guess, a 2-car garage, but it was only meant for 1 car because on the other side, she had potatoes. I remember going out there and getting potatoes out of the ground with her. So I really enjoyed reading about that. It's a memory I had long forgotten about.
Right.
We planted tomatoes this year for the first time. And we have 6 pots, and I've never done any kind of gardening at all, but it's been a real joy to watch them grow and to take care of them. And yesterday, we started late, so yesterday we picked our first ripe tomato, and it was almost like having my first child, it was so exciting.
It is exciting.
I took pictures and sent them to everybody.
My mother was a city girl. She grew up in Dallas, and when she cooked, it was always out of a can. Vegetables were out of a can or frozen or whatever. And so I hated vegetables growing up. We ate hamburgers. We ate like that. And when I went to graduate school, we moved to Florida and lived out in the country. And we had I was in graduate school. I was being paid $600 a month, and I was just married, not to Bill. I was just married, and my husband was going to get a job, and we were going to be fine, right? Well, our rent was $625 a month, and I made $600, and he didn't get a job for like 3 months. So we had a garden, and we were eating out of the garden, and surviving on whatever we had. Our neighbor taught us to work in the garden and let us share in what he had. And I learned a whole new experience about cooking and vegetables that it totally changed not only how I ate, but my understanding of food. To me, chicken was, you went and bought chicken at KFC, or if you had to cook it, you got it from the grocery store. It wasn't an animal. It made all the connections happen. So reading this reminded me of all that.
Absolutely. That's kind of an interesting point that you brought up. It reminded me of sustenance, the earth can provide sustenance for us, but sometimes I know from my perspective, I am kind of one of those people who kind of doesn't know what to do with the vegetables. So it's either broccoli or spinach, something kind of easy. But definitely, even in these COVID times, like people are kind of returning to like growing their own foods and things like that, because we had trouble kind of going to the grocery store. So thank you for those thoughts. That was wonderful. Anyone else?
The phrase "mud baby dirt person" reminds me of something, and also growing vegetables. My grandfather was a farmer, and he had dedicated a little patch of his very good blackland cultivation to a watermelon patch. His house was on the top of a hill, and there were pasturage going down to the cultivated part. So this watermelon patch was right at the edge of the cultivated part near a stock tank. So one day he took me down. I always followed him everywhere. He took me down. He was going to plow, and the watermelons were just ripe. And he sat me down in the watermelon patch. He took all my clothes off but my underpants. He took out his big farm knife and he cut open about half a dozen of these watermelons and just left me there while he went plowing. And so I gorged myself for the rest of the afternoon with my bare hands on watermelons.
Got a little healthy dirt, I guess.
And when he came back, I was a mud baby. A dust creature.
That's
What a wonderful story.
So he picked me up, took me to the stock tank, baptized me, dunked me until I had all the watermelon juice washed off of me, and he could bear to put me in his truck and took me home sopping wet.
That's wonderful. Wow.
So great.
But I've been a mud baby.
Oh yeah, the true sense of the word, huh? Okay, so all right. So there was another mention about physical life. Okay, if all life is holy, then anything that sustains life has holy dimensions too. And I think that kind of reminds me of this story that Miss Susan just shared a minute ago, like, you know, that the cultivation and the growing of the vegetables, like, you know, there is something holy and set apart in that it sustains us. And however the openings come to you, they offer you the chance to bear the reality of the universe in your flesh like a thorn. So that was on page 154. I'm wondering, I can't remember exactly why I picked that that quote, but what? Maybe I moved on. Oh, that's the next chapter. Oh, yeah, that's why I was like, that's not the right title for that. So we'll go on to that in just a moment. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
That was part of chapter 10. Okay, about the practice of feeling pain. So I was like, how does that connect to physical labor? But I was like, okay, sorry about that. Okay. So chapter 10, the practice of feeling pain, and the subtitle for that chapter is Breakthrough. So our discussion question for that is, when do you allow yourself to feel your pain fully, and when do you use a coping or defense mechanism to lessen it? What is your most reliable defense? What do you think will happen if you do not use it against your pain? So I guess kind of an overview of chapter 10, she talks about like different types of pain and how we have different coping mechanisms to cope with pain. Does anyone have any thoughts on the discussion question?
This was the hardest chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Terribly difficult.
No, I'm not sure I agreed with everything she said. I mean, I'm not really very good at pain, but I'm not even sure. I'm not there where I even agreed with everything she said. So.
Okay. Is there
What do you think of emotional pain? rather than physical pain. And my defense mechanism is handing it over to God because I realize there's nothing I can do.
Well, I think she was I think she was talking a lot about physical pain and how you deal with physical pain and how we don't deal with it because we have every kind of pain killers and every kind of, you go to the dentist and you ask them to put you to sleep before they fill a cavity or, but sometimes you just, and then she talks about people with chronic pain and how they have to learn to live with it, and how you can, how that can change your relationship with the Lord. And I thought it was real interesting. I thought it was hard like you did, Helen, but I thought it was, I was interested in the way she looked at things.
She was talking about the distinction between pain and suffering, though, that you can actually, in many cases, do something to relieve the pain. But it's what, and I think, Helen, maybe you were talking about maybe in suffering, that you turn that over to God. I could never go to the dentist, though, and say, I don't want any pain medication.
No, but I did identify with her story about that, getting that vaccination, because when I was a kid, they had to pin me down whenever I had to get a shot. And I guess they were all penicillin shots because we got too many of those. But they would have to hold me down. Well, I'm not afraid now, but I was then.
I'm right with you, Susan.
Well, I could identify with that because when I was little, they had to do that to get blood tests. And so when she was talking about she didn't want to get married, if there was a blood test involved, I could really relate to that. It was actually when I got pregnant the first time that I thought, okay, now I'm doing blood tests for another reason. I felt it was a more suitable way to, or something, purpose for having one, and they didn't bother me so much. But
better payoff.
Right.
I know she mentions like pain as a spiritual practice. And so, I was like, whoa, that's interesting. But because I've seen in history, they talk about people who faith brought them to do like things of a self-flagellation. I don't know if that's the word for it, where they would like whip themselves and things like that. And so that's what brought to my mind. But I was like, in these days that we live in, we do have all this access to pain relievers and things of that sort. So this was kind of a confusing chapter for me personally. That's why I was interested in Miss Suzanne, like her thoughts on the chapter, because she kind of disagreed with kind of what was going on. Did you have any specific kind of things that you wanted to kind of discuss?
Well, she was talking about the two things that happens to people. Some of them, they're actually broken like an empty rag with, no hope of what other people become stronger. And we have a friend who had something called Behçet's, and it's the disease from hell. She suffered terribly for years upon years, and her spine finally just crumbled from all the prednisone, so that she was just a living little ball sitting in her wheelchair in excruciating pain all the time. And she never complained. She was never angry at God. She was always making a joke. I've said to Art for years, look, I'm no Barbara Ration, but she didn't use this pain. I mean, she didn't try to do this as a spiritual exercise. There just was no escape for her. And so she did turn it into something beautiful for the people around her and got through it. I think that's the difference between that pain and suffering too. I mean, she obviously was suffering, but she chose she had the pain, but she chose to live as though she weren't really suffering. Do you know what I'm saying? It wasn't the focus. Suffering was not her focus.
Right.
But she set the example, the bar, way high.
Yeah, that kind of reminded me of what was stated earlier. If you can't solve the problem, change the problem. So I'm going to be thinking on that this afternoon to see how that kind of goes together.
Well, my husband was the one that taught me that you watch someone live. You don't want to watch them die. And so that, with our son, that completely changed my view. So that's kind of changing the problem to make it something better. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I like the way she talked about how you shouldn't, say, okay, so what was I guilty of that this bad thing happened to me, or that I have this pain? That you don't go looking for guilt when you're dealing with something bad. And I like that. At least that's the way I read it. I may have read it wrong, but that's the way I read it.
A lot of people, when they have situations like that, their question is, why me, why me, why me? My former sister-in-law, they had, my brother had lots and lots and lots of health problems. And as a result of that, they had financial difficulties. And she said, I just don't understand why this keeps happening to us. We go to church every Sunday, we tithe, we do all the things we're supposed to do. Why is this happening to us? And, you can read the Bible from cover to cover, and God never promises a rose garden.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try, when something like that happens to me, rather than
You're making music.
you say, why not?
It's like slow motion.
Yeah. Miss Glenda, your sound cut out a little bit, so we weren't able to catch the rest after the kind of why me part.
I think she's frozen.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so
I hadn't made this connection till just now, but something's happened in my life that connects chapter 9 to chapter 10. So my most recent experience of excruciating pain was it just last year or 2 years ago? Can't remember.
Yeah.
At any rate, I fell off a horse and created what's called compression fracture of one of my vertebral bodies. And it was painful. Could have been worse painful, but it was painful. In fact, I was knocked out cold. And when I came to, I hurt. So I had a lot of pain in my back, and I went to see a bone and spine specialist at Scott and White. And he strongly suggested that I not try medication or any surgical procedures to relieve the pain, but just to go to see a physical therapist and exercise my back and take exercises for my back. So that's chapter 9.
Hmm.
I mean, so ever since then, I've been going to a gym under the direction of physical therapists and trainers at the gym and exercising, and that's hard work. But it has helped my back immensely. I can do things now that I couldn't do a year ago. And so that's how I have coped with my pain, by doing exercise.
I've had the same experience, Arthur. I had some back issues and started lifting weights and don't have any problems anymore.
Yeah. Well, I know that I have to continue the exercise because when I couldn't go to the gym anymore in March, my back started hurting again, and I had to do something. But at any rate, so the practice of physical labor is linked together for me with the practice of coping mechanism for pain.
That's great. And
Kind
as
of-
you, yes, as you were speaking, that kind of reminded me of like time and effort. When you have physical things that you're doing, you have to have some faith in the process in hopes of getting the result. So, you know, I think maybe that's how we can look at this kind of as a spiritual process, is that we take our effort with God's, you know, will and his power. And I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but together that kind of gives us like this future that we kind of want and that he would want for us. So just thinking out loud here, but that was a good connection between those two chapters.
Can we say amen when you think out loud?
No. I just think, and I was like, wow, I think I'm like, because these two chapters were a little bit difficult for me. The others I think were easier for me because I had more personal connections with them. But I know, honestly, I don't do a lot of physical labor. And if I'm honest, I don't have a whole lot of pain right now, you know, but, you know, just keep living and you will have plenty of pain. So that's why I'm thinking like, oh, I'm, you know, even when I was thinking about this class, I was like, well, I'm going to have to depend on the class for these two chapters. And you're all experienced because, you know, don't have a whole lot here today. And so does anyone else have any thoughts? Okay. So here's a couple of things that I kind of looked at in the book. Pain pushes. Was there someone that had something to say? Okay, just making sure because you know, sometimes there's a lag. But pain pushes people to the edge, causing them to ask fundamental questions such as, why is this happening and how can this be fixed? And so that's kind of what Miss Glenda was talking about earlier, you know, those types of questions, like to kind of make sense of the pain that we have sometimes. And the author continues on, I can try to avoid pain, I can deny pain, I can numb it, and I can fight it. Or I can decide to engage pain when it comes to me, giving it my full attention so that it can teach me what I need to know about the really real. And so this kind of brought to mind, like, how do you usually handle pain? Does anyone have any thoughts or anything to share? Like, how do you usually handle pain and how does that work for you?
I'm sure I don't want to engage it, but you know, that's just hopeful talking.
Yeah.
Well, pain helps you know what you need to do. You know, if doing something hurts, you either need to do it differently or do something else.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's how our body tells us we're doing something wrong or doing it, you know, or doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, or have to make some changes.
Right. Like what Art was talking about. If your back is bothering you, then you've got to make your back stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you got to do something to, you know, so exercising helps. I mean, that's been my experience too. But also, you know, if your shoes are too small and you get a blister, maybe you need to get bigger shoes.
Yeah, just face that bigger number. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it just means a new pair of shoes, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Yeah, that's so good. Wow. So yeah, and that's a point that I kind of thought about as well. It's like, I know a lot of people have the tendency to try to avoid pain, but I think we just have to recognize it and to think like, okay, why, you know, those questions like, why is this happening? And, you know, how it can be fixed, but more so like, what changes do I need to make? Like, why is this getting my attention kind of thing? So whether it's like physical pain or like emotional or social types of situations, I think you can have those similar processes and thoughts, you know.
It is a fabulous motivator.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, and oh yeah, the author also brings up pain makes theologians of us all. The pain the pain had not only changed the way I pray. Oh, when she talks about she had the injury to her eye, it also had changed her ideas about the one to whom I prayed. And so there's also the mention of pain versus suffering that has been mentioned earlier today. Pain as I'm sorry, pain as related to flesh versus suffering is related to the mind. And the theodicy, I hope that's right. I've looked it up, the pronunciation, but I was like, now I'm second guessing myself, is the answer to the question of why God permits evil. So those were some other issues and points that the author brought up about pain versus suffering. Anyone have any thoughts along those lines? Well, I know the question that this kind of brought to mind was, have you survived a painful experience that delivered you into a larger life? Like, you know, some kind of, I'm sure, I know that some people have had experiences where there was a lot of pain and hopefully, you know, something different or better came out of it. Does anyone have anything that they would want to share?
Bertie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, when I first found out, I got really ill one Friday, and I went to the emergency room in one of the hospitals at Austin, and it was a horrible pain. I just felt terrible in my right side. And so they took me in, did a scan, and brought me back to the room with the ER doctor, and he said he had some good news and some bad news. And that's when I found out that I had a tumor in my right kidney. And it was really painful. And I dealt with that pain as long as he was talking to me. And he finally said, we're going to give you something so you'll feel better. And then I've already scheduled a surgeon to remove the right kidney. Well, at that time, I just kind of sat there. You know, it was really not only pain, but emotional pain as to what was happening to me. And so all of a sudden I said, well, what's going to happen next? And he said, well, you'll see the surgeon and he will remove the kidney within just probably days because it was that big, the tumor. And so that's what happened. But I just felt like then that everything, it sort of fell apart in a moment. And then all of a sudden I said, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. I'm on the right road. And even the pain, even though they hadn't given me anything, the pain sort of subsided. So I think just coming to the realization that that's what it was, that's what I had to deal with, and I would just continue. And so that's what I did. But the pain, that probably, you know, they say you do remember childbirth, but that pain was so excruciating. It was awful. I just felt so bad and hurt so badly. But at that point, all of a sudden I had just peace. And I knew that everything was going to be okay. So that was one point in my life that really made, I still can remember that day very, very vividly. And I probably will always remember it.
Thank you. Does that experience help to kind of get through some of less painful experiences that you have?
Well, it helped me to get through with that and get that over. And the kidney was removed within a week, and I did feel pain with that for a little while, and I did have pain medication. But I think that experience and dealing with that, then I had 1.5 years of chemo every week. So, you know, you have to learn to deal with that also. And it was just like, I had good doctors, I had good friends, I had a good support group at church. So you just learn to deal. And there were times when I felt so bad that I had to eat to live because I didn't want to eat. So I can remember those times, but you get through them. You get through them and you're stronger for it. But I wouldn't want that to happen to people just to make them strong. Don't get me wrong. But you do learn how to live with things and how to deal with it, very much so.
I had a similar experience. I was diagnosed with hepatitis C, and I was, at first I was really angry because I couldn't figure out where I got it. You know, I never did intravenous drugs. I had not had a transfusion. I did, you know, it was a mystery. And then I began to, and I had no symptoms. It's just one of those things that they found in a physical, you know, just, I don't know, it just showed up. And I was really, really upset because I started reading up on it and what it does to your liver and what it's like to die of liver disease. And I was so upset. And then my doctor said, don't worry, there's a treatment now. There didn't used to be, but there is now. And he said, the only thing is, I hope you have good insurance because it costs $4,000 a month. And so that kind of threw me off. And then, as it turns out, my insurance did pay for it. So for a year, I took a shot every Monday morning. And I gave myself a shot every Monday morning. And every day I took these pills that did not allow me to sleep. That no matter how tired I was, I couldn't sleep. So as you said, Gloria, I ate to live because I was so tired. I wasn't hungry. And all of this happened about the time Gina and I got married. And so very shortly into this, I began to realize how really fortunate I was, because I got this disease, or I was diagnosed with this disease at a time when there was a cure for it. Right. And I did have good doctors, and Gene was the best nurse in the world. He took such good care of me for that year. And so it really turned it turned me around as far as thinking about, you know, I guess, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? I could have, and at first did, moan and groan and whine and cry about this terrible thing that was happening to me. But then when I really began to look at all the, you know, how fortunate I was to have all that support, and the people that I knew that had diseases that didn't have cures and that didn't have support, that definitely, that turned out to be a really good thing in my life, a really, really good thing. And I never would have thought, you know, at the beginning of it that I would ever say that, but it was.
Absolutely. And, you know, that kind of brought to mind that it's easy to trust God during the good times and the easy times, but definitely it's the time to trust God during the hard times and the painful times, and to just know that He has a plan. You know, people like to think that, oh, people just say that. But like you said, like the time that you were diagnosed, you know, there were so many things in place to care for you and take care of you. And so, you know, we have to remember in these tough times that God knows what He's doing. And definitely, I have to tell myself that a lot of times, you know, even though you don't see the next step ahead of you, you trust the person who's ordered your steps. So definitely. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Okay. Oh, there was a lot. You know, I don't think we'll probably have time to cover it, but when the author brings up about Job and his suffering, I think there's enough there to unpack for a class separate in and of itself. So I just kind of put the highlights here, you know, about like some people try to be helpful during helpful during painful times. But sometimes they say things that are they're meant to be helpful and comforting, but sometimes they hurt. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts that they would like to share along those lines. But the author points out that what really helps is generosity, you know, giving, rituals, to kind of remind you and ground you to like where you are and who you are in your relationship with Christ, and paying attention to things around you. Does anyone have any thoughts to share about either experiences where people tried to help or like actual activities or situations that really did help? I know we've kind of covered this a little bit before, but I just wanted to give it another opportunity.
I think that all this that I've gone through and all the treatments and everything, I've been doing this since 2010. I think what I think that helps the most, and I've tried myself, when people are telling you something, listen to what they're saying and let them walk through it. And then if they have anything they want to share other than that, but I've learned not to ask questions, just to listen and just be there, because that's the most important thing. And I have a friend that she is so good at that. She just listens. She never gives me any advice. She just listens. So there are times when we'll call each other and we'll both rant and rave, and the other person will not say a word. So that's my thing I've taken from all of this, is that when somebody comes to you with something, just listen. Just be there for them. Don't try to help them or answer any questions or give them a way out, because sometimes even if you tell them, it's not a way out for them. So my thing is just listen to your friend or to the person who is actually sharing with you.
And Birdie, as you say, sometimes people are trying to comfort you and it makes it worse. Like, there's a reason for this.
Yeah.
God did not have my child born like he was. There wasn't, but God got us through it, and God takes care of him now, along with my husband. But I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I've told people over and over again, all they have to say is, I'm sorry, and listen, like you said.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I worked as a volunteer chaplain at our little hospital in Liberty, and the administrator called me one day and said, we've had a 3-month-old infant brought in from crib death, and the nurses are having a very difficult time. And so I went to the hospital and I was comforting the nurses, and I went into the room where the parents were, and I don't know who he was, some county official was saying, well, honey, it's just God's will.
Oh.
And I just could not keep my mouth shut. I knelt in front of that. She, maybe 23, 24 years old. And I knelt down in front of her and I said, no, this is not God's will. God's will was for your baby to be strong and healthy and live forever. But bodies sometimes fail. And I was just furious. I was so angry at that man. I've never seldom wanted to punch somebody, but if I could have done it away from everybody else, I would have punched that guy.
And even though people are really trying to do something else, of course, we internalize everything. People tried to get us to go to faith healers. In Waco, there's some faith healer. I mean, they just will give you all kinds, and you say thank you. But not long after Stephen died, who was our little baby, somebody in our church, Carrie and Susan, Susan, I don't think you were here yet, but was in a terrible accident or something in Colorado, and the whole parish was praying hard for a long, long time, and then so he got okay. I mean, it was a very long thing. I can't really remember any details. So I said, see, if you pray, it'll be answered. If you pray, it'll happen. Well, okay, they just told me I didn't pray enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
yep.
And I don't,
Helen, do you remember when we went to the ECW conference and that priest talked about, if you pray hard enough, and how his child put his hand on his leg and healed on the father's leg and healed a wound. And this was not so long after Stephen's death. And we just looked at each other and said, we're in the wrong meeting.
Yeah, I do.
And that guy meant well, and he,
yes, that's Yeah.
But you, as you say, you internalize things that are going on around you when it sort of involves itself about that.
Glenda already stated that if you read the Bible, it does not say it's an easy life or that we're
Right.
living an easy life. And I think all the point of praying and the point of our belief is that we know God will be with us.
Yes.
He does not wish ill on anyone. I believe. And
I
so-
had, I was
Prayer
at a
doesn't-
conference. I was at a conference one time, and a woman was relating a pretty tragic experience, and she said that someone had come up, or several people came up and would say things like, well, everything happens for a reason, or God, the God's will. And she said, and this was really powerful to me, she said, I just don't believe that. I believe that when things like that happen, I'm sorry, that God is just as sad as we are,
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
but that nothing is wasted in God's economy, that God will take things like that and he will bring good from everything if we will let good happen.
Absolutely.
And to me, that was a real resolution for me in that kind of situation.
C.S. Lewis said, prayer doesn't change God, prayer changes me.
Yeah.
And that's been the thing that's been most useful to me to remember, is that when I pray, I am not trying to get God to control the world. I'm just trying to get God to help me figure out how to get through it.
Yes. Amen to that.
And Barbara Brown Taylor also on page 158, this meant a lot to me when she was praying to God after she got her eye hurt and was in so much pain. She wondered why he wasn't doing anything to make it better. And then she realized that she was just praying wrong. And she finally, it says at the end of the long paragraph there, the pain had not only changed the way I prayed, it also changed my ideas about the one to whom I prayed. Because that's where she's saying, I can't find it right here, but that she knew God had been present with her through that pain.
It's right above that. She says, finally, close to dawn, I found myself turning away from the God in charge of pain removal toward the God who had stayed with me through the pain, no matter what I said.
That's it.
Right.
And we have to remember that no matter, a lot of people do have good intentions. So you have to just look at them and say,
Yeah.
and maybe not even make a comment, but you have to remember that the only comfort that you receive is really from God. And I always envision, even through a lot of things that I've been through, that God has his arms around me. And that's comfort.
Yeah.
And that's really the comfort that we need. There are people who are comfort to us, but most of them have good intentions and they really are good people, but they just really don't know what to say. And I guess maybe that's one thing we should help people do, is what do you not say?
Definitely.
Yeah.
This was a good discussion today. I got so much out of it myself personally that I just have so much that I just have to go back and digest. But does anyone have any thoughts about ideas to take into the next week, or how this will impact going forward? Any big thoughts? I know there's a lot. I'm just in awe of like how many different things that I have to go back and reflect on, because you all have given such good like context and experience to like the words that I read. So thank you all for that.
Let's not read anything else about pain.
Right. I agree.
Let's just take away all the pain, okay?
Let's have a dancing class or something.
I kind of need that now, because it was heavy in a good way though. That it's like, oh whoa, I'm making some connections. So
Well,
wow.
what is the saying, that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger?
Well,
I got
which song?
yeah, I sort of got the feeling like I was an emotional superwoman. I mean, I felt like, and that, not that I could do anything, but I wished I could be like an empath and there was an old Star Trek show about an empath. You could take someone's pain by touching them, and this empath would take the pain on. I wish I could take pain away from people I know and love who have gone through pain.
Right.
But I can't be. Oh, you can just be there.
No, but God can.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Does.
Yeah. Okay. So this was a great session. Oh, next week is our final week. The last 2 chapters, 11 and 12, being present to God and pronouncing blessings. So we made it through.
Yeah.
These are good chapters.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
I haven't read them, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to get to it, when I get back home. We're traveling today, visiting family here in the Houston area. And so then I'll head back later this afternoon. So.
Eat good Mexican food.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, we have to try to squeeze that in. We have our masks, so.
Right. That's all there is to do there. Eat
Yeah.
good Mexican food.
Oh,
Yeah.
Italian food too.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So does anyone have anything to share with the group or anything? Okay. Well, I hope you all have a good week. We'll just do our closing prayer today.
Wait, I do.
Okay, sorry.
I missed it last week, but I had the 9th anniversary of my ordination to the diaconate.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good day. A good day.
Congratulations. Awesome. We're thankful to have you. You give so much to our group and to the church, and so we're just blessed
Thank
by it. Anyone else? Well, would someone like to lead us in our closing prayer?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Let us pray. O God, our King, by the resurrection of your Son, Jesus Christ, on the first day of the week, you conquered sin, put death to flight, and gave us the hope of everlasting life. Redeem all our days by this victory. Forgive our sins, banish our fears, make us bold to praise you and to do your will, and still us to wait for the consummation of your kingdom on the last great day. Through the same Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
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 All righty, everyone. Have a good week this week.
You too, Bernie.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Bye.